Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. This is my report in EDUC 503 Psychology of Learning. My topic is about a memory model. What is memory? Most models of memory in psychology have an input information channel. This model allows for information to be acquired through many areas. Memory refers to the processes that are used to acquire, store, retain, and later retrieve information. There are three major processes involved in memory: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Human memory involves the ability to both preserve and recover information we have learned or experienced. Memory is perhaps the most alluring topic of research in psychology, cognitive science, and neuroscience. Through decades of trivial and breakthrough research insights, we know a little bit about memory. In fact, some of the aspects of memory have become common knowledge. You'll see people say, "My short term memory is bad, but long term memory is good." People know types of memory, and that is good. Some are even aware of the types of content they remember well: facts, names, places, directions, etc. The self reflective nature of one's own memories produces intuitive insight. How is the memory important to psychology? Why study memory? Memory makes a fundamental contribution to our everyday mental experience. Accordingly, a desire to improve memory and tempered anxiety associated with its loss represent a significant societal concern. Without memory, independent living can become very difficult, if not impossible. Types of memory model. Sensory memory. Sensory memory allows individuals to retain impressions of sensory information after the original stimulus has ceased. One of the most common examples of sensory memory is fast-moving lights in darkness. If you've ever lit a sparkler on the 4th of July or watched traffic rush by at night, the light appears to leave a trail. This is because of iconic memory. The visual sensory store. Two other types of sensory memory have been extensively studied: echoic memory, the auditory sensory store, and haptic memory, the tactile sensory store. Sensory memory is not involved in higher cognitive functions like short and long-term memory. It is not consciously controlled. The role of sensory memory is to provide a detailed representation of our entire sensory experience, for which relevant pieces of information are extracted by short-term memory and processed by working memory. The next one, short-term memory. So what is short-term memory? Short-term memory is also known as working memory. It holds only a few items. Research shows a range of 7 plus and divide minus items and only lasts for about 20 seconds. However, items can be moved from short-term memory to long-term memory via processes like rehearsal. An example of rehearsal is when someone gives you a phone number verbally and you say it to yourself repeatedly until you can write it down. If someone interrupts your rehearsal by asking a question, you can easily forget the number, since it is only being held in your short-term memory. Next one, long-term memory. Long-term memories are all the memories we hold for periods of time longer than a few seconds. Long-term memory encompasses everything from what we learned in first grade to our old addresses to what we wore to work yesterday. Long-term memory has an incredibly vast storage capacity, and some memories can last from daytime they are created until we die. There are many types of long-term memory. Explicit or declarative memory requires conscious recall. It consists of information that is consciously stored or retrieved. Explicit memory can be further subdivided into semantic memory, facts taken out of context, such as Paris is the capital of France, and episodic memory, personal experience, such as when I was in Paris, I saw the Mona Lisa. In contrast to explicit declarative memory, there is also a system for procedural implicit memory. These memories are not based on consciously strong and retrieving information, but on implicating learning. Often, this type of memory is employed in learning new motor skills. An example of implicit memory is learning to ride a bike. You do not need to consciously remember how to ride a bike, you simply do. This is because of implicit memory. Episodic memory. Episodic memories are type of explicit memory that relate to our own personal lives. For instance, the day you get married or even what you had for dinner last night. Studies have shown that autobiographical or episodic memories aren't necessarily accurate because we reconstruct them over time and they change and adapt to the new context in which we recall them. Our ability to retain episodic memories depends on how emotionally powerful the experience we were. When our brains are extremely focused, it becomes easier to process and store sensory input, which in turn makes it easier to later recall the experiences. Semantic memory. Semantic memory accounts for our general knowledge of the world. Example, the fact that the sky is blue, giraffes have long necks, and puppies are cute. Unlike episodic memory, we are able maintain the strength and accuracy of our semantic memory over time. As we age, it begins to decline slowly. Okay, so there are different models of memory. The Atkinson-Shiffrin model. The levels of processing approach, Tolving's model, parallel distributed processing models. So what is the Atkinson's Shiffrin model? Description of the model. A structural model that suggests three storage systems or places: sensory store, short-term memory (STM), long-term memory (LTM). From Best Cognitive Psychology in 1995, information moves through these systems under the control of various cognitive processes: attention, rehearsal, etc. The distinctions among the three structures is made on the basis of four characteristics which emerged from the literature: capacity, duration, type of code, and mechanism of loss. Research. The model originated as a way of explaining some of the early research findings which argued for a duplex theory. The study by Kent and Bosch For example, shows that items at the beginning of a list are coded semantically as characteristic of LTM, while items at the end are coded acoustically STM. Over time, however, the distinctions marking the boundaries of the structures have begun to blur in more recent research. Current status. After having been abandoned for a while in favor of the levels of processing model, most people have returned to some form of duplex theory. Next one, the levels of processing approach. Description of model. This approach suggests that deeper levels of processing produce better retention than shallow levels. Craig and Lachart, 1972. Depth is interpreted in terms of meaning, a dimension which starts with the physical characteristics through verbal acoustic to semantic, leads to distinction between elaborative rehearsal and maintenance rehearsal, explained by the fact that as you go from shallow to deep processing, more links to other elements in memory are established, can be understood in terms of distinctiveness and elaboration. Research. Theory was supported in a series of classic studies, Craig and Lockhart in 1972, Craig and Tolving in 1975. From Matlin, Cognition in 1994, study by Palmer et al. In 1983 supports the role of elaboration. From Matlin, Cognition in 1994. Also possible to interpret literature on the self-reference effect in terms of elaboration. Current status. The theory was quite popular for a while as a replacement for the duplex theory of memory, lost status as a result of a metasystemic problem. As problem of circulatory, there is no independent way of defining depth of processing. In the end, the depth of processing model was reintegrated with the duplex theory. The Tolving's model. Description of the model. Tolving's in 1972 model focuses on the nature of the material that is stored and distinguishes three kinds of memory based on content. Episodic memory stores information about when events happened and the relationship between those events relates to personal experience. Semantic memory is the organized knowledge about the world, essentially all the facts we have accumulated. Procedural memory involves knowing how to do something, relates to scale learning, the connections between stimuli and motor behavior. A demonstration of the distinction between episodic and semantic memory from Matlin's Cognition in 1994. Research. Underwood et al. 1978 tested 200 college students on 28 measures of episodic memory and 5 measures of semantic memory. In terms of performance, measures between the two kinds of memory were uncorrelated. Shubin et al. In 1978 found that variables known to influence semantic memory affected performance on a semantic memory task but not an episodic memory task. However, there is about an equal amount of contrary evidence. See Radcliffe and McCune in 1978, which found that episodic memory emphasizes conceptual rather than temporal relationships as suggested by Tolving. Radcliffe in 1986 found that episodic memory could be recalled quite quickly. Neuroscience research is likewise not conclusive. Current status. In general, researchers are skeptical about Tolving's distinction between episodic and semantic memory, and it has not been retained. The distinction between these two and procedural memory, however, is being retained as useful one, supported by a considerable body of evidence. Parallel distributed processing models. Description of the model. Cognitive processes, including memory, can be conceived as networks in which the elements exhibit multiple links. This can be abstract in nature, where nodes in a hypothetical network are connected by associative links, or biological in nature, where neurons or neuron-like units are linked. Based on cognitive science assumptions that intelligent systems can be built out of dumb elements. The intelligence is in the connections. Units in the system, through their many links, may affect other units through excitation or inhibition. Representations, knowledge, memory exist in the resultant patterns of activation that occur in the network. Local processes giving the rise to these patterns occur in parallel at distributed sites. Memory storage is content addressable. Every new evidence changes the strength of the connections among the relevant units. The last three characteristics account for our ability to reconstruct materials on the basis of incomplete or faulty information. Research, a highly abstract and theoretical approach analogous to theoretical physics that may be so significantly ahead of present methodology as to make hypothesis testing difficult, used mostly to explain earlier literature. Current status, an exciting new development which we have just begun to explore. So there are three stages of memory process: encoding, storage, and retrieval. What is encoding? Encoding or registration, the process of receiving, processing, and combining information. Encoding allows information from the outside world to reach our senses in the forms of chemical and physical stimuli. In the first stage, we must change the information so that we may put the memory into the encoding process. Storage. Storage, the creation of a permanent record of the encoded information. Storage is the second memory stage or process in which we maintain information over periods of time. Once the information has been encoded, we have to show how to retain it. Our brains take the encoded information and place it in storage. Storage is the creation of a permanent record of information. So in rehearsal, sensory input, sensory memory, short-term memory or STM, long-term memory or LTM. In sensory memory, information not transferred is lost. In short-term memory, information not transferred is lost. What is retrieval? Retrieval or recall or recognition, the calling back of stored information in response to some cue for use in a process or activity. The third process is the retrieval of information that we have stored. We must locate it and return it to our consciousness. Some retrieval attempts may be effortless due to the type of information. That's all about my report. Thank you for watching and listening. This is reporter Nawira B. Dibangkitan. Assalamualaikum.